Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Today I have a guest with me, and I'm excited to speak with her. Her name is Janine Durso. Janine's a certified life coach, and she has a podcast called Kill the Unicorns, interestingly enough. And she and I connected through a private membership group called Mastering the Podcaster Mindset. I loved her vibe. I thought we had some things in common with our messages, so I wanted to bring her in to meet with you guys. So hello, Janine, and thank you for coming and joining us today.
Hi, Marianne. Thanks so much for having me. So happy to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. As I explained to you earlier in a message that we were having, we've been talking about how life is messy and it's filled with lots of ups and downs and different seasons. And, some are challenging and some are great. We've all been there, right? But we also talk about knowing what we can do to get through those hard things and how to overcome those challenges and create a happy, healthy lifestyle filled with joy and gratitude and growth. And again, I think our messages have some things in common there. And so before we get into the hard questions, just kidding, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the premise for Kill the Unicorns podcast?
Sure. I'd love to. So, listen, we all have unicorns, whether we call them that or not. But the unicorns are things that we chase to bring us happiness. So we're like, oh, if I could only get that new job, I'd be so much happier. If I could only make more money, if only the time was right, then I would change something about my life. There's always something outside of us that we're looking to get or wishing we had, or one of those things. And I call them the unicorns because they're like these shiny objects, these sparkly things that were like, if I could just get my hands on that thing, everything would be all right. And I want to offer that we have to kill them, kill those unicorns, because I know it sounds harsh, but we have to realize that our happiness and our worth and our sense of fulfillment is not ever going to come from anything outside of us. We have to do it from the inside out. So that's what I help women learn how to do and teach them how to do. Because once we can get rid of those things outside of us, now I want to caveat myself because someone said to me once, "Are you telling me to kill my dreams?" Right? Because those sound like good goals. I want that new job. Why don't I want that? That more money would make me happy. Why are you telling me not to go after that? And I'm not saying not to go after that. What I'm saying is when your happiness or your sense of fulfillment is dependent on that thing, that's backwards. Our sense of fulfillment and confidence and worth has to come from the inside. We have to generate that ourselves, and then we can go after the goals. Then you go after that new job from a place of not being dependent on it happening for you to be happy. You're already happy. That changes everything. When you can create that sense of fulfillment and happiness inside you first, and then go for everything you want, that changes the game. Then you're not distraught if it doesn't happen because your happiness is not tethered to it. Do you know what I'm saying? So we have to like kill that unicorn so that we can build ourselves up from the inside first, and then we really can create exactly what we want.
Yeah, that's a really great message, but it's also probably a really hard message for most people, right? It's often hard to find those things inside ourselves that make us happy because we've worked our whole lives to chase those unicorns, as you call them, right?
Yes.
So, what is your advice to your clients around how to get in touch with yourself and get closer to those things that can make you happy from within versus externally? And I don't know if it'll help, but I know you kind of went through a transition in your life as well in your day job and all that, and I'll let you touch on it. But did that help you come to terms with what, what you were doing there and trying to find that inner fulfillment?
Absolutely, 100%. So I did just leave my career after 30 years. I was in advertising in New York City. I was a creative director, and I had so many unicorns. Like all I did my whole life was chase the unicorns because that's what we were taught. That's what we were taught. Go for the promotion, go for the job, the bigger house, the new car, blah, 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 blah. Keep up with the Joneses, whatever it is. Search for the thing outside you. That's the achievement that'll show you you did good, right?
Mm,
And when that thing doesn't happen, when somebody loses their job, layoffs, that's happened to me as well. People are crushed, right? To the point where they're like, that was my identity.
mm,
And now it's not there.
yeah.
So who am I? And that is really the first place I start with a client is like, who are you? And that is the scariest question because we are not used to asking that of ourselves. We're not used to answering that question. I can tell you who I am to my husband, my kid, my neighbor, my boss, my person on my team, whatever, the guy at Starbucks. Like, I can tell you who I am to all these people. I don't know who I really am. And so when we're so tied up in finding the things outside of us, right, that give us our purpose, then we lose ourselves. We don't know. And so some people have come to me to say, help me figure out what I want to do next because I lost my job and I don't know who I am because I was always dependent on them telling me who to be. I was dependent on the annual review to tell me, was I doing good? Right? Like it's heartbreaking when you think of it that way because you're like, how many times are we doing this with anyone, not just a job, not just an annual review? Tell me who I need to be, right?
Yeah, I think we get caught up in this
Mm-hmm.
so much, like my whole life. I mean, this is my story too. And I think, like you said, that first step when something big shakes up that world and you can start looking at yourself and having a minute to really think and reflect,
Yes.
it really starts the hard work. And one of the things that I've noticed, and my community falls into this group of women that are, I'm going to say, mid 40s and above, most of us over 50. I think that that's a sweet spot for people starting to take a step back and really look at their lives and say, I've been caught up in this life that just kind of happened to me for all these years,
Yes.
right? You didn't control it. It just happened to you. And so I have two questions because I always ask people this, like, why do you think that starts to become such a visible thing or a loud whisper to people at our age, right? Why does that start to really change? And then what are some of the first steps you advise people to sort of start stepping into that?
So, number one, I want to say it can start today, right? You don't have to wait for that thing to happen. And so, what I think in this age, I'm in the same age group, is a couple of things. We either have kids that are grown and they're leaving the house, and now you're suddenly like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
like,
What do
wait a
I
minute,
do now?
what do I do now? Number one, I happen to be early 50s with an 8-year-old. So I'm not at that stage yet, right? But at the same time, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I waited all my life for this child, and now I'm never seeing her because I'm still in this career where I'm working 80 hours a week. So I think there comes a point where something shifts no matter what it is. We kind of like, I'm not sure exactly how to define it, but I think at this point in our lives, we've either gotten through raising of the kids or we're starting to raise the kids, or maybe we don't have kids. It doesn't only have to be about the kids, but you're just at this point where you're like, wait a minute, wait, how have I been spending my time?
Yeah.
What is happening here? You kind of like now you're not the 30-year-old at the job, right? You look around and you're like, I remember when this happened to me, I was like, oh my God, if I do the math, I could be their mother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the kids that are coming in at 24 years old. I'm like, oh gosh, okay, wait a minute. I've been doing this since I was 24, like you said, on rinse and repeat,
Yeah.
on rinse and repeat. It's just where did 30 years go? I don't even know. So let me just pause. It could be a number of things that creates that, like, let me pause for a
The
minute. It
shift.
doesn't have to
Yeah.
be, yeah, but it doesn't have to always be. In fact, I encourage it not to be a major life event because we can do this at any point. But I want to say that there is probably something And everybody's like, what are we putting off?
Yeah.
Right? What are we putting off? So for me, it did end up being a couple of health crises, and I still powered through them, continued on, right? Just got back to work like nothing
Of
happened.
course.
And right. And it was one a couple of years ago that really made me take stock. It was, I needed to take 6 months off to get better. And it was that point that I was like, wow, okay, I can't, like, my doctor was like, you will have a stroke if something doesn't change today. And so I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
I guess I had to come to the brink in order to change the thing I kept saying I wanted to change, but I didn't know how.
Yeah.
So when we get aware of the thing, then we can start the process. And you don't have to be at the brink to start the process. But when we start the process, the first question is always, who am I?
Mm.
And what do I want? I mean, literally ask yourself today, all your listeners, like, no matter where you are in life, there might not be a crisis staring you in the face. That's great. Who are you and what do you want? Are you living the life you say you want to live? And if not, let's do some work. Let's do it. Because how long is it going to be? When will that be? When you are at a brink? When you are at a breaking point? When, there was another incident for me just happened in November where they literally had to stop and start my heart. Oh my God, can I tell you this story? No one's really heard this publicly before, but back in November, like I had this heart issue for a very long time. Not life threatening. It's called an SVT, not life threatening. I was just living with it, dealing with it. But it would interrupt my life every once in a while, blah, blah, blah. For years, I knew that there was a solution. It's called ablation. Not a big deal. And I'm air quoting that, but like this is what certain doctors do all day, all night. Like this is what they do. I was terrified of that. So I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I know SVT. I know how to deal with this thing that's happening to me for the last 20 years. I will just live with that. I'm not doing ablation. Okay. So now I have an SVT last November, cannot get out of it. I know how to get out of these. I have medication to take. I know how to do certain things, like certain tactics to get out of it. Nothing worked. I end up in the ER. I was in the state for 2 hours of this SVT state, which means your heart is going crazy. So your heart like quadruples. So my rate should have been 70 sitting still. It was 185 sitting still. They're like, you've been in this mode for 2 hours now. We have to stop and start your heart. Oh, okay. No problem.
Have at it. No big deal.
Please get on that as quickly as possible. So it's terrifying. It took a second. It wasn't that it was a long, they didn't have to do an operation, nothing. It was an injection of a certain medicine. It happened. The doctors were very pleased that everything went back to normal within 5 seconds. I, on the other hand, was feeling the effect of being rebooted physically. And so that was just this intense experience. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because that was another pivot point, right? That was another visit to the brink. And I'm like, how much longer am I going to wait
Yeah.
to check in and see how am I spending my time? Still working 15-hour days, still doing all the things. Am I living the life I say I want to live? And so that was really the impetus for then a couple of months later, leaving the job, leaving the career, the 30-year career, and saying, let me live the life I want to live. Let me not wait for the next brink to choose, to decide to live the life I say I want to have. And so I will say that it starts with what do I want and who am I? Who do I want to be? And then also it sides with believing that you can have it.
Mm.
Because I think for the 30 years prior, I would talk a big game about all the things I wanted. But if I didn't really believe that I could have it, I wasn't going to be able to create it.
Mm.
So we have to know what we want, and then we have to believe we can actually have it. And that is the basis. That is the start. And then there's a lot more after that, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I agree with all that. And I think that a lot of times figuring out what it is that we want and believing it, I mean, that's some really hard work. And for some of us, I think it's almost out of reach. Like I really feel like you forget, right? So one of the things, and I shared with you, is I had some time off and I took 6 months off and I finally had time, similar, very high paced job, whatever. I finally had time to think, to breathe, to think, do some things that I had forgotten how much I loved to do. And then I started remembering, like things started waking up. So I tell people, try to remember some of the things you loved to do when you were younger, right? Before life got crazy. Or What are the things that you can be working on that time just flies and all of a sudden, 5 hours go by and you don't even know you were doing it? There's some messaging there that you're not picking up on because that's a sweet spot for you and there's some passion in you that's looking for those things. And I think you have to look for those signs because I don't think there's like this big screaming test or this big screaming sign that says, here's the thing, here's the road you missed in the path you should have taken. So I think there's a lot of work to do there, but I think that once you start on it, more and more doors open and more and more messaging is there.
That,
So I'm sure that's a lot of the work you do.
that is exactly it. And I think that, tapping into yourself and answering that question, right? What do I want? And it's not just like, oh, what's the final destination? But on an everyday basis, yes.
Yeah.
And how do you answer that? Exactly what you just said. Let me find what I enjoy, what lights me up.
Yeah.
What do I get excited about? Exactly that. Exactly that. But a lot of people, like you just kind of hit on it too, is like people want here's 5 steps on how to,
Yeah.
right?
The easy way, the
Please give
easy
it to
way.
me. Right,
Yeah.
right. Like just serve it up to
Yeah.
me. But, it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
But a lot of the process is the same. Like we have to tap in, we have to go inside. I will say this, we're used to looking outside of us
Yeah.
for those achieving the thing, right? And we were brought up that way. It's nobody's fault. We've just been trained by our parents who were trained by their parents, and the world has shifted since then. And luckily we get to do this work now where we're like, oh, I am more in control of my life than I think. And to no fault of theirs, it seemed like the promised land was outside of us when really it's in,
Yeah.
So I think now that we're shifting that and learning more about what really creates our life, then we know that we can be more in control of that. So
Well, one of the other things you said when you were talking about that was believing that we can do it and having the confidence that it's not just something that's out there, that we could actually do it or be it. So that makes me think about, I did some research on some of the things that you put out there and that topic that you had about your thoughts are not facts, right? So I think that many of us have those negative thoughts, right? They're those soundtracks. I always bring up John Acuff's book,
yeah,
and it's those soundtracks, right? They just
yeah,
keep playing, and it's typically, unfortunately, most of us lean towards the negative ones, like why we can't do something or what's blocking us. So, tell us a little bit about your position on that, about thoughts not being facts, and how that we can use that to our advantage about trying to find the belief in ourselves.
absolutely. Because our thoughts or the stories we tell ourselves, our brains always want to go to the negative. Because let's understand what our brains are actually designed to do. They're designed to keep us safe and make us right. So when we find and look for the evidence of what went wrong in our lives or what's going wrong or why everything's terrible or whatever, or what we can't do, oh, I'm too this or I'm too that, or we really can get harsh on ourselves, right? We're like, oh, I'm not smart enough to start a business. And your brain will be like, oh, yes, let me serve up all the ways you're not smart enough to start a business. Here's
Yeah.
27 different ways. Remember this, remember that, remember that. And you're no good with money and you're no good with time and you're blah, blah, blah. Like it wants to make us right and keep us safe. So it's going to tell us all the things and pile up the evidence for that argument because it wants to keep us safe from doing the thing we're telling ourselves we're not good at, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so once we understand that, because that's happening whether we know it or not, and we can probably recognize that that's what's happening, but that's our brain's job. So once we know that, really we can look at it and say, oh, okay, you're doing your job. Okay, I get what your job is, but is that true? Is it true that I'm not smart enough to do this? Like we have to train ourselves to really get wise on what our brain is doing. And so, yes, our brain wants to keep us safe. It's very good at that. And thank you for keeping me safe till now, right? In certain like dangerous, legitimately dangerous scenarios, right? But it doesn't know the difference between like a tiger attack and public speaking. Like it doesn't know the difference. So it's just going to always kind of like keep us where we are. Thoughts are not facts is that we make up a lot of story. We just talked about that so quickly that we don't even realize that we're doing it, number one.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to separate that story from the facts of what's happening because our thoughts are happening so quickly that when something happens in the world, we don't even realize we're having a thought about it. We think that that thing is creating our feeling. We think like that person said this thing and I am so mad about it. We think it's because of what they said, because our thought about it happened so fast, we don't even realize we had a thought that created our feeling. But if we can interrupt and slow down that process, and we understand, oh, what that person said did not make me mad. That's not the thing. It was my thought about what they said that made me mad. But that thought happened in lightning speed. We didn't even know that it that it happens. We just thought they're responsible for my feeling of mad. Your thoughts are opinions about the facts. The fact is the circumstance of what's happening, what that person said, because it has to be provable in a court of law. So, what that person said, if we were to quote it as a quote, fill in the blank of whatever they said, that's provable. We can prove that they said that thing. That's the only fact. Not that that's a terrible thing they said, that's my thought. So, whatever they said is the fact. That's it. Everything else is what our brains brought to the table. The thing that they said was really neutral until we assigned meaning to it with our thoughts. So when we assign that meaning with our thoughts, that's us. That's on us, right? Our own thoughts is what create our own feelings. So if I'm mad, I made mad with my thought about what they said. Now, it doesn't mean I shouldn't be mad. Doesn't mean I have to be happy about what they said. I can definitely decide to be mad, but I also could have thought, what do they know? They don't know what they're talking about. That generates a different feeling than mad. That might generate a feeling of indifference or nothing, right? Like, I'm not mad. They can say what they want. Okay, I don't believe what they're saying.
It's not until you put that feeling into it. Dr. Amy Johnson, I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but she has a few books and she talks a lot about this. And yeah, like you said, it could be neutral. It's just until we have that reaction and then we put the thought around it. And I think you also said you got to slow down. I mean, that's part of the work, right? Slowing down to recognize your thought.
Yes, like we don't even realize it's happening, but this is how our life has been. This is what goes on,
Yeah.
right? And so until we know and we're like, oh, wait, it's my thought. I really was giving that person so much credit for my feeling, whether it's good or bad, right?
Yeah.
It's not whatever they said, it's what we think about it. And so, what we do first, what I do first with my clients, besides also who am I and what do I want, is really looking at the thoughts we're having. Because if we're not aware of the thoughts we're having, then we don't know how to interrupt them and we don't know how to utilize them. So, really, the first thing is not even to judge ourselves or be like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm thinking that way. It's just say, what is going on in my brain? Let me become aware. Let me become an observer of what's happening in my brain on autopilot. We don't blame ourselves. We don't get mad at ourselves. And then I can ask myself some questions about those thoughts. Like, is that true? Is that true? Do I like that thought?
Yeah, really separating out the fact from the fiction.
Yes.
I think the example I heard you give, which I think is super relatable to everybody in your podcast, was about the weather. And it was, 39 degrees and whether that was cold or freezing or whatever the analogy was. But
Right.
really it was, the temperature is 39 degrees. That's the fact. Some people might think that's warm and some people might think that's cold, but you can convince yourself that that's a fact as well. It's cold today. It's 39 degrees.
Yes.
Well, not really. It's 39 degrees. That's it. Period. End of story. That's your fact, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And the other example was the traffic jam.
Yes.
Because we all can relate to traffic. Two people can be in the same circumstance of no cars moving and one person can have that thought that this is terrible and then that'll generate their feeling of frustration and just anger, and their actions from that might be like pounding on the steering wheel or honking the horn or yelling in the car or calling someone up to rant, and then your result is that is pretty terrible way to spend your time. And the other person in the car next to them, the same exact circumstance, might have the thought, I'm going to make the best of this time. Like there's nothing I can do about it. We're stuck here.
Yeah, I'm going to call my mom. I'm going to listen to a podcast.
Yeah. And that shapes your experience in the world, is how we're thinking about what's happening.
Yes.
So it's our thoughts are optional. And that in itself is a very powerful statement, that our thoughts are optional.
And I think recognizing that, I can so picture myself in that traffic jam because I did it for so many years, but recognizing that pattern and being able to say to yourself, wait a minute, hold on, what other thought could I have, right? And kind of shifting your perspective. You could do that work once you understand that.
Exactly. And I want to stress that it's not to say oh, everybody should love the traffic jam. No, no, no.
Right.
It's not that you need to be happy about everything. That's certainly not the point, right?
Great segue. Great segue. So, I wanted to ask you about the happiness, what it is and it is not. And I think your premise on that was around everybody thinks they should be feeling happy emotions all the time and that's not true. So,
Oh,
that was a good segue for real from you.
I didn't realize that was coming in
Good work. Good
there.
work.
Yeah.
But I think it is, right? Because you don't always have to feel happy to have happiness, in your life and be living a joyful life.
Yes.
That's your premise, right?
100%. And so we think we have to be happy all the time. People even say it like that's the goal of life is to be happy all the time. Don't you want to be happy all the time? Why are you crying? Be happy. And this toxic positivity, like good vibes only, and I'm like, really? Because I actually want to be a human being with like the full human experience. And that does not look like being happy all the time. And so I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be happy all the time because, again, it's one of those things from the outside that everyone's like, your life looks great. Shouldn't you just be happy? What do you have to complain about? Everyone has it harder than you, or whatever the case may be. So we put this pressure on ourselves to be happy all the time, and we're really not meant to be. I mean, as humans, we're not meant to be happy all the time. And there are times that we really want to be sad or mad or frustrated. We have that choice. I want to feel all the things. But I want to say that the more we try to be happier all the time, makes us less happy
Yeah.
because when we then feel like, oh, I'm sad today or whatever, and we think we shouldn't be, right? Then not only are we sad, but we like stack on other feelings on top of that. Like, oh, now I feel shameful for feeling sad because I think I shouldn't be feeling sad. I should be feeling happy. And now we're stacking on other negative feelings on top because we think we shouldn't be having a negative feeling. And so once we can say, oh, wait, this is part of the deal. This is what I signed up for as a human. This is okay. I'm happier because I know that the goal is not to feel happy all the time. The goal of life is to
Yeah.
feel the entire buffet of feelings.
Buffet. Yeah.
That is what makes the life, what makes a rich life. Like when we are, sometimes I talk about our feelings as like a beach ball, like negative feelings as a beach ball. Like imagine you're standing in a pool and you have this beach ball and you're looking at those like that's a negative feeling. Instead of letting it just sit on top of the water and bob around you, just let it be, right? It moves closer to you, goes farther away, whatever. You're just like, no, no, I got to get this thing away from me. Like, and I'm going to push it down underwater and I pretend it's not there.
Pop.
Right. Exactly. Like, it's like, what happens. Your arms get tired, that ball gets slippery. And then before you know it, pop, it just shoots up higher in the sky than it ever would have had you just allowed it to be there.
Yeah. Great analogy.
So you really like have to accept that your whole life is supposed to be all the feelings. It's okay because you're going to have good ones and you're going to have positive ones and negative ones. And I actually stop myself from saying good and bad because feelings are not
Good or bad.
good or bad, but we grew up that
Yeah.
way, right? I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but it was like you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't feel sad. There was like no room for that.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh no, that's not a bad emotion.
Yeah.
It's just a feeling. It's just an emotion. And yeah, bring it on. Bring me all of them. Bring me all of them. Because if I start to push them down, what does that look like? When I push down that beach ball, that's you're going to try to make believe it's not there by like doing other things to mask it. Like that's when we go for the cookies, the wine, the binging of anything, Netflix, cookies, wine, whatever, you name it. We're just trying to numb that
Yeah.
pain, pretend it's not there. This will make me happier. When no, we could actually decide to feel sad.
Yep.
We can just decide,
Just walk through it.
yeah, allow it to be there and really experience it. And sometimes, how you just need a good cry, please have that cry. That's just moving energy. Like, we can cry. It's okay.
Yeah. Again, back to sort of the premise of some of the things that we talk about here. It's that sort of roller coaster of life and the ups and downs. And we know that we're going to have those valleys where things aren't great and they don't feel great, but we also know we're going to come out of them as well. And it's all about being able to accept both. And I also think it makes you more appreciative of the positive, really joyful moments in your life when you also know that sometimes it's not so joyous and you will get both, but you can really hold on to those special moments. And that segues nicely into the other thing I wanted to ask you about, which was you talked a little bit in one of your podcasts around your friend's experience with this too shall pass. And in sort of an unconventional way than I'm used to, because that is a saying I say very often. And when I heard you say that, I was like, wow, I never really thought about it like that. But it goes along with my messaging, right, of the season. So can you share with my audience that message you got from your friend's experience?
Absolutely, because this too shall pass is a phrase that we often say to like comfort someone and like kind of let them know that, good times will come again, you'll get through this. We are well intentioned, right? I mean, I grew up saying that too, but it was always as if, oh, this is bad. Just hang on. This too shall pass. Like the sun will come out again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Wonderful. However, my friend was telling this story and it hit me too, which is why I shared it on my podcast. My friend was telling a story where she was at this party and things were going amazing for her. She was like in a new relationship, new job, everything was going fantastic. And she was sharing this like at a party or amongst some friends. And as she was saying this and like really on a high, this person in the room, like not really quite in the conversation, said, "This too shall pass." And she was like, what, like jarring, like she just shared all this amazing stuff that's happening in her life. She was like just so elated, and why was this guy tearing her down? That's how she felt, like why is he trying to rain on my parade right now? And he said, well, just know that this too shall pass. And after she kind of had to think about it, because it was so counter to like
Yeah.
what you would normally say to someone who's sharing all this good news, but it's so true. And it opened my eyes to say, yeah, it's all going to pass. So the bad times will pass and the good times will pass. And then the bad times will pass again. And then the good times will pass again. Like, expect that. Expect that. When we think it's all going to be all good all the time, we are actually causing ourselves so much more pain when we think that those times shouldn't pass. Right. And we like the other thing was like, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is too good. Things are too good right now. The other shoe's about to drop. I'm like, yeah, yes, it will. Like, please know the shoe will drop. This too shall pass, whether it's good or bad. And that's okay, because that is life. But we somehow were taught that all of that negative or whatever, I'm air quoting, not good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not supposed to be there. And so when we can accept that all of it, both sides of the same coin, heads and tails, come on the same coin. You can't split it apart. And when you realize that that is all part of the same picture, then you don't wish one side of that coin away. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, this is all supposed to be here. And actually, that is what leads to you being happier
Mm.
when you know how to navigate that part, right? When you know how to like navigate your mind through those parts. I mean, for me, most of my life, it was like, nope, you're supposed to just have this part, and the other part is so bad, like you've got to just push it away, and you're not equipped to deal. And now, if you know all of it's at the table, even like fear, anxiety, pain, shame, all of that stuff. Here's another analogy coming your way, but I tend to use these metaphors. Like all these feelings, like are like just come to the table. They're all at the table. When you think they're not supposed to be at the table and you try to push them out of the room, like you're causing yourself more pain by doing that. So now I think of them like as welcome guests. Yeah, please come. What am I supposed to learn from you, shame?
Yeah.
I see you here. Let's have a conversation. Why are you here? That's so interesting that you're here right now. What do I have to learn from you today?
I think that mindset of what can I learn from you today, always trying to be that in discovery mode, if you will.
Yes.
That's so fantastic because I think it can help you separate the actual feeling and it gives you an action to work on, right? So trying to figure that out. Where's the message? Again, my message in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this was about, right? It was about as we go through life, we learn all these things and have things happen to us, or even we read books, because I bring that in as well. There's all these messages hidden in the middle of everything, right? But you got to do the work to
Yeah.
find what that message is. It's sort of like I always say, put your little decoder ring on, right? Because it's hidden in there somewhere. But I think figuring that out and trying to do the work around it, it really brings you to a much more enlightened place where you can really think things differently and act differently and embrace life a little differently.
And it helps you not beat yourself up,
Yeah.
right? If we're like, let me get curious.
Yeah.
So part of that awareness that we talked about before is a curiosity, and to say, oh, yeah, get curious about, why am I feeling this way right now?
Yes.
Not like I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I should only be feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
Why am I feeling this way? That's so interesting. So if I know now that my feelings come from my own thoughts, what am I thinking about? And let me just get curious. I'm not going to use it against me. I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to pretend I should be thinking something else. Like, let me just see, where am I right now? What's happening in my mind that's creating this feeling? And then just get curious about it.
One of the things that Elizabeth Benton, she's the author of Chasing Cupcakes and Tools for the Trenches, we love her.
Mhm.
And she says, to remind yourself, what else can you think about it? Like, that's not the whole truth. That's not the only thought. So, what other thoughts could there be? What other perspectives? And I think if you get in the habit, and she says this, and I do think it's true because I've worked on it. If you get in the habit of forcing yourself, asking yourself, like you said, with curiosity, to shift, to change your mindset, to look at that other perspective or ask those other questions, it opens doors up. You just start looking at things differently and you can then process them. I almost said feel them, but process them differently, right? Because you now have a couple of perspectives you can kind of look at and think about.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. I call it equal time, where your brain wants to come up with this, right? All these thoughts about something over here. And that's just automatic. But how do we look at and ask those questions? I love that you just said that. How do we look at that another way? And let me give equal time to the positive of that. Like, what is it in there? Whatever the situation is, what are my thoughts about it? If I'm coming up with all these negative things, I have to give equal time. I made those up with my mind, by the way, right? Like, they're not facts. As we said before, the thoughts are not facts.
Yeah.
So if I just made up, they feel true
Yes.
because that's what our brain's default mode is. But I have to give equal time to the other side.
Yeah.
So, and it feels really awkward and it feels challenging.
Yeah.
And you can't even do it at first. I couldn't do it at first, right? Because we're not in that practice of doing that.
Correct.
But when I say, okay, I have to give this equal time, to your point, you just said, you have to force yourself to do it. And if you know now what your brain is up to, and it's just been practiced for your whole life doing it this way over here, it's going to take some time to make it look at the other side of that. But when I say equal time, you have to really, even like physically take a piece of paper and write it down, like, because it's going to be hard. I did this exercise a couple of times on something because I was like, nope, here's a 500 negative things about this situation that just feel true. And I know they're my thoughts, but they feel like facts, right? And so I had to really like take a piece of paper, split it down the middle,
Yeah.
and then look at the other side, give it equal time. And I couldn't do it. I found maybe one thing and I really couldn't. My brain was like, nope, still, I added five more to the other side, the negative side. And then I really had to force myself. And so I came back and added and added. And honestly, it took me a week. The first time I did it, I was like, I really had to like,
Yeah.
okay, I could, my negative side got a lot longer and then my positive side. But once it started, I was like, oh, now, because here's what happens. We're telling our brain to look for the evidence over here. We're just not used to saying that.
Yeah.
We're not used to making it look for it, but your brain is so good at trying to make you right and keep you safe. So when you start to force it, like you said, to look at the other side, it will serve up the evidence
Yeah.
for the other side.
An example of that I think everybody can relate to is
Mhm.
if you ever go to buy a new car, right? You're looking at types of cars you're going to buy. And I don't know, pick Toyota Highlander. That's what I drive, right? I would never notice them on the road. It's just not something my eye would pick up on until I was looking for a Toyota Highlander. And then all of a sudden, every third car is a Toyota Highlander, right? Because my brain started finding the evidence that they were out there. So to your point is once you tell it and you get your brain in that mode, it will find the right evidence, but you do have to retrain it to do that.
Yeah, because like you said, it wasn't like all the Highlanders were just
That did,
dropped onto the planet when you said you wanted to look for them. They
yeah,
were always there. And so just have to train your brain to look for the things. And then even from there, your life can change even just from doing that practice.
yeah,
Because when your brain wants to find, when you put into it, you're programming into it, here are the things I want, right?
yeah,
The car, I want that car.
yeah,
Oh, here they are.
yeah.
Here they all are.
Lots of options.
Now, yes, here they are. Let me show you all the things that you want in the world.
Yeah,
And so now, you try that with other things. What's the kind of job I want? What's the kind of relationship I want? What do I
yeah,
want for myself? How do I want to feel?
yeah,
We start plugging in these things, and now it's like fun. You're like, oh, yeah, my brain's amazing. It's like it's helping create the things I really want. And they're already here. We just haven't really figured out the way to get it because we haven't asked ourselves the right questions.
yeah. And I do think you hit on it that it's retraining your brain, right? We know from other discussions and other things that we've dug into, retraining the brain is absolutely possible, but we are naturally inclined to take those paths that we've always take that we, do as a habit, and we have to create new paths and create new habits. And I think it's that retraining exercise, but once you start doing that, it's much easier as you go forward.
Yeah, and people don't even know they can, right? I
Correct.
mean, because our brain's working on the way it was wired
Yes.
to. And then our parents and teachers and, their parents and whomever, like society is telling us this other way to be and think. And then we're just not practiced. We just never did it. And so, yeah, it's so powerful when you can be like, oh, wait a minute, I get to choose.
Yeah.
I get to choose what I think. Oh, yeah, this is what's happening in my life on autopilot
Right.
for the last however many years since I was born. It's all this information is coming in, and we don't check into it. We don't challenge it. We don't say, oh, not challenge in a bad way, just to say, oh, do I want to keep thinking that?
Yeah.
Right? We never just like check, and we're just like, oh no, this is the way I think. But well, you said something about beliefs earlier, and I want to say that we never like our beliefs are things that we have thought over and over. And so if we're not just like checking in to say, oh, this is what I believe, but where did that come from? Was that my parents' belief? Like even when we talk about like money or whatever, your beliefs about money, let's say, for example, did I take on my parents' beliefs of scarcity or whatever? Maybe it's not only bad, but like, where am I in that? Like, what are my beliefs about money or whatever, So it's like take stock of the things that you believe in and then just say, I wonder, why have I believed that all my life? Oh, that came from my grandma, blah, 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 or my parents or my neighbor said this and I believed it. Why? Okay, do I want to believe that? Is that true?
Yeah. Are there facts that back that up
Mm-hmm.
in my life, right? Versus
Right.
in their life, and you just inherited that thought?
Yeah, and so this is like so when we even say our thoughts are not facts, right? Ask the questions about the things that we're thinking. Is that true? Do I like it? Do I want to keep thinking that? Is that thought serving me? And so we can do that with our thoughts on a daily basis, on whatever, and we could do that with our beliefs that we think we've held on to these beliefs our whole life. It's time to we never take a look at what they are and say, do I like these? Do I still believe these?
One of the things that we say is change your thoughts, change your life, right? You can change your thoughts and change your whole life,
Yes.
but there's work there. You just got to do the work.
Yeah, because the rest of that equation, and we talked about it with the car, the traffic jam, was like the thought starts, right? It's independent, it's related to, but you can see that it's not at the mercy of the circumstance, right? This thought starts in our own brain, right? So our thoughts create our feelings, which determines our actions, which show up as the results in our life. So the circumstance does not need to change. In order for you to change your life, your thoughts have to change. So, and again, it's not think happy thoughts. It's like just getting an understanding of what's actually happening. And then where is our power in looking at the perspective? What do I want to think about this? If I know that the thought I'm having today is creating the life that I have, what do I want to think? Because whether we want to accept it or not, our thoughts have been creating our life this whole time.
Yes.
We've just been blaming the circumstance
Yeah.
because we thought that's how it worked.
Yeah.
but our thoughts have been creating our life this whole time. And now that we know that it's up to us, it might feel really scary. And, I say that my clients get kind of pissed about it, to be honest, because they're like, hold on a minute. They're like, wait a minute. Why have I been thinking this way my whole life? Why didn't somebody tell me sooner that this is how it works? And we're learning. It's okay.
Yeah, we're
We're
figuring
figuring
it
it
out.
out. It's
Yeah.
okay. Like, let's start today.
We're more enlightened.
Right. Let's start today. Like, let's not
Yeah.
beat ourselves up what we didn't know. We know now.
Yeah.
So what can we do? You know?
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, this has been fun.
So much fun.
So tell my audience again where they can find you. I'm sure some of them will want to look you up.
Sure. JanineDurso.com. JanineDurso.com. And that's my website at Janine Durso. Coaching is where you'll find me on Instagram and Facebook. And then Kill the Unicorns is the podcast. So, yeah.
Awesome. We'll put that stuff in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. So fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.